What's going on YouTube? Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment so we can move the chains. And today we're going over the American style football versus the Canadian style of football and everything you need to know, which makes Canadian football different from what we know in America. And this is from an American's point of view if you're watching this in Canada. First things first, let's go over the fans. And there's a Canadian Football League professional, if you did not know, with the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Hamilton Tiger Cats, Calgary Stampeders, Montreal Alouettes, Saskatchewan Roughriders, Edmonton Eskimos, Ottawa Redblacks, BC Lions, and the Toronto Argonauts. There's also Canadian college football. There's something called the U Sports League. While the CFL does have 9 teams, they are considering expansion, but I won't really get into that. Now let's talk about the fans. There are tons of fans across the CFL, but one thing that they do that you notice on TV watching these games, they wear jerseys without numbers. Now I asked people from Canada, I looked on Reddit, and I also looked on the internet, and basically they wear jerseys without numbers. One, because it's way more cost effective. The price of the jersey is in fact lower, which is very true. Also, players move around so much that they just want to have a jersey of their team, which hey, that makes sense. I get it. Shout out to you CFL fans who commented on my community post. Now let's go over the field size. Now the CFL field is considerably larger than an American field. It's 110 yards long. The end zones are 2 times the length of American end zones, 20 yards. The field is 65 yards wide as opposed to 53. So these fields are ginormous, and it creates lots of room for big plays, which makes the CFL very exciting. Now, there are 12 players for each team on the field as opposed to 11. One interesting thing is there are virtually no tight ends in the CFL or in Canadian football. And then also wide receivers can motion any way they want to. So that means they can get a running start from very far away and have an advantage over DBs and corners. Now in the CFL, you can score 1 point. You can also score 1 point in American football, but it's highly unlikely. In the CFL, it's not as difficult. The kicking team can score if they punt or miss a field goal, and the receiving team fails to return the ball out of the end zone. They can also gain a point if the ball goes out. Some teams place their punter in the end zone to punt it out to not give up a rouge, which is what the point is called, and avoid giving up a point. We saw this in 2010 in a crazy CFL finish where they tried to punt it out of the end zone, were unsuccessful, but this is the way the CFL teams can score 1 point. In the CFL, the scrimmage zone is 1 full yard between the defense and offense. I'll admit it does look a little bit funky, but there is a 1 yard neutral zone in the Canadian Football League. One huge factor in the CFL is with all that field space and the motioning to the wide receivers, say, well, you should be able to get a first down easily with 4 downs, but in the CFL, they only have 3 downs to get a first down. So instead of a 3 and out, teams have a 2 and out, or should I say a 2 and out. There are also no fair catches in the CFL, although there's a 5-yard halo rule to protect the returner. I mean, you cannot get within that 5-yard halo until he catches the ball and has possession. The time rules are also significantly different. There's a 20-second play clock, so much shorter. Each team only gets 2 timeouts per game, which is crazy to think about, but you can't use both within the last 3 minutes of the game. And then there's also a 3-minute warning as opposed to a 2-minute warning. The clock stops after every single play after 3 minutes of each half, so I guess there's not as much of a need for timeouts. Now let's talk about the overtime, and I'm actually a huge fan of the CFL overtime. So it starts normally, there's a coin toss, but there's no kickoff. The ball is just placed on the opponent's 35-yard line. It kind of reminds you of college football. Each team gets 1 chance to score. Also, after each touchdown is scored, you have to go for 2 just in the first round. After each team has 1 possession, the team with the highest amount of points wins. Now, after 2 rounds, if there's still a tie, in the regular season, the game is considered a draw. But in the postseason, the rounds just keep going. Now, let's touch up a little bit on the history of the Canadian Football League. The Canadian Football League can be traced back all the way in Canada to the 1860s when the game was a little bit more rugby than football, but it did eventually evolve in the 1930s to the 1950s into more of a football looking sport that we're used to today. In fact, in 1956, the official Canadian Football Council, the CFC, was created, and the name was later changed to the Canadian Football League just in 1958, 2 years later. And the CFL took possession of the Grey Cup, which is the Super Bowl for Canadian football. It's a beautiful, beautiful trophy that the Canadians have in the CFL. It's also worth noting that in 1993, the CFL attempted to expand into the United States, which is just crazy to think about. If you had a CFL team in the United States, I think you would feel pretty weird about it when teams were doing the Canadian national anthem, O Canada, in the US. Now, although this was an epic failure by the CFL, the Baltimore Stallions were actually a precursor to the modern day Montreal Alouettes and gave Montreal a team, so the US expansion for the CFL was very important. Now, you're probably wondering, if you're in the CFL, how much money can you actually make playing in a league like this? The minimum salary for each player is $54,000 in the regular season, which is not bad at all, but that does not include signing bonuses, performance bonuses, preseason and postseason games. You get paid each week. You get a bunch of bonuses, so that's nice. You get preseason and postseason play bonuses. If you're in the playoffs and your team is doing well, you also get paid. And it's worth noting that this number will increase to $65,000 as a player minimum in 2020 and 2021. The highest paid player in the CFL is BC Lions quarterback Mike Riley, who signed a 4-year deal worth 2.9 million Canadian dollars, and that is a giant contract for a CFL team. So you can make a lot of money and a great living in the CFL. The CFL season is a whopping 21-week regular season from late June to early November. That is a very, very long season, and that's the regular season, so that's not counting preseason and postseason if you're a CFL player. The CFL has been successful, although many people in America may not know about it. It's a very exciting league with very exciting teams and players. I actually made a video a couple months ago about players you might not have known in the CFL. I'll make sure to put that at the end of this video in the card so you can see that. I love the CFL. I've always been a fan. Probably one of my favorite teams is the Calgary Stampeders, just because I have a friend who plays wide receiver there. But let me know what you think down below about the CFL. Have you ever watched it? Do you have a favorite team? Thanks for watching the End Zone. Make sure to like, subscribe, and comment so we can move the chains.